Let's start in this bulletin with our top focus this hour. Centre's delay in clearing 70 names for judgeship recommended by various high courts has now irked the Supreme Court. After the Attorney General sought a week's time to come back with instructions on the pending recommendations, Justice Kaul delivered his fiercest message so far, expressing distress. Justice Kaul said, and I quote, "I thought of saying a lot, but since the attorney is asking for 7 days, I am holding myself. But I won't be quiet on the next date," unquote. Now, the two-judge bench of the top court panned the central government, reminding them that the 70 recommendations made by the High Court's collegium are pending since November 22, including the appointment of the Chief Justice of a sensitive High Court, indirectly referring to Manipur, which has been on the boil since the start of May. Now, the Supreme Court also expressed concerns over the fact that the delay in appointments would lead to great candidates losing interest and withdrawing their name, which in turn tarnishes the image of the judiciary. In fact, to discuss more on this, we are joined in by two guests on this broadcast. First, of course, Parvez Menon, who's a senior partner at MGM Legal, and also Dr. Justice Satish Chandra, who's a former judge. Thanks a lot, gentlemen, for joining us on this broadcast to discuss this issue, which, of course, the Supreme Court now is fiercely referring, making remarks about this, and also bringing the central government's attention to this issue, which it claims is going to be very, very serious, and it's going to become even more serious in days to come. Well, of course, let's start with Mr. Memon there. And my question to you, of course, will start with the delay that the Supreme Court is referring to. In fact, the bench has said that the 70 names for judgeship recommended by the various high courts have been pending before the government for the last 10 months. Why do you think this process is getting delayed so much, and how do you assess the impact of this on the functioning of the judiciary?
Yes, Ashish, I must say that I agree somewhere with the view taken by Justice Kaul yesterday during the hearing of the matter, and it is indeed distressing to see that the government is sleeping over it for last 10 months. The recommendations has been sent way back in November last year, and as 70 names were sent, only 10 have been cleared and 60 are still pending from that lot, and 9 others are pending from the other lot. So it is very disheartening to know that the government is taking its lackadaisical approach towards appointment of higher judiciary, where pendency of matters is such that if you see the statistics, as on today, about 60 lakh cases are pending in several high courts of this country. We are the worst country as per the ratio compared to people population to the judges ratio. We have 21 judges for 1 million people in India. Given these statistics, there is an urgent necessity to appoint the vacancies, to fill in the vacancies and appoint the judges as early as possible. If they see the workload of judges, we appear in the high courts day in and day out. The boards of each individual judge runs into hundreds and 200, 300 matters per day, which is physically, humanly not possible for a judge to decide. The government should take urgent action on this. Political intervention should be minimized, and there should be no political, considerations for appointment of judges.
Well, absolutely, Mr. Memon. You gave a broader view with the statistics on the lack of judges as far as various high courts are concerned. And in fact, that, of course, has been a view of the Supreme Court as well. But the top court has time and again, I'm taking this point across to Dr. Chandra now. The Supreme Court has time and again mentioned a sensitive high court. And of course, we can all guess which state the reference is for. Can you shed some light on the significance of timely judicial appointments, especially when it comes to states like Manipur, which have been on the boil?
And no doubt that appointment should be expeditiously made by the government. Mr. Menon, my co-panelist, has already mentioned, and he has given the data that we have one judge, 19 judges on per million population, and more than 5 crore cases are pending. And question is this: that there is no delay in the appointment, not only delay the appointment in the high court judges, but also in the lower judiciary. And when they know very well that such and such post will be vacant on a particular date, why they are not taking the steps in advance? And regarding the collegium recommendation made by the Supreme Court collegium, question is this: there are some, are you considering that government is merely a rubber stamp? Whatever the recommendation will be made by the collegium, that government will put on the rubber stamp. No, they will have to examine it. Ultimately, the appointments will have to be made by the executive, by the President of India. So question is this if you will see the recommendation, 90% or 80% recommendations are from the dynasty of the judges. So they will have to see. Sometimes they are recommending the homosexual judge. They are recommending some other judges who have the pending cases. But my submission, and I agree with you, that there should be the expeditious disposal of the recommendation, maybe negative or maybe positive. No, it is not necessary that government will accept all the appointments recommended by the collegium. Government may refuse for the reasons
Well,
given.
absolutely, Dr.
There
Chandra.
is,
Now, it is pretty rare that everyone on the panel, agrees on the same point, and clearly you and Mr. Menon are also agreeing on the same fact that the appointments have been delayed. But again, the solution is what needs to be looked at. What steps? Again, this question is of course for Mr. Menon. What steps do you think should be taken to streamline and expedite this particular process? Because 10 months again is a very very long time, and the fact that Supreme Court is coming down so hard on it again goes to show how grave of a concern it is. So, what steps do you believe should be taken to streamline and expedite this particular process?
Yes, Ashish, we can read between the lines. We can read the displeasure expressed by Justice Kaul as you started this debate with his quote unquote quote that he is holding himself back, but he has a lot to say. We will have to see how this hearing shapes up. He has given an indication that he will be hearing this matter every 10 days. Once this hearing takes place, I expect of the Honorable Supreme Court to frame certain guidelines and issue time frame. Like once the collegium recommends the name, it should provide a timeline for the government to come back to it, and in the event of failure of coming back to it, it should be deemed as allowed, because political interference and sleeping over it and allowing this situation to continue is not only having grave implication on the judiciary but at a population at large.
Absolutely, Menon. Mr. Menon, you made a good point there about comparing the number of judges that we have with the population, and it's not just about the delay in judges that is a concern, but it's also about the lack of resources that needs to be looked at. And when you put all of that into perspective, it really goes on to show what the Supreme Court is trying to convey to the central government. But again, I'll take
Yes,
that point
Ashish,
across to Dr. Chandra there,
ultimately
who's
it's the
also been a
people of
former
India that
judge.
are suffering.
Dr. Chandra, exactly, exactly. That's exactly
yeah,
why we are debating this particular topic, because Supreme Court also has been referring to this, especially when it comes to states like Manipur. I'll take that point across to Dr. Chandra now. Dr. Chandra, from a legal perspective, just a few days back at the International Lawyers Conference, the CJI, in the presence of Prime Minister Modi, said that the judiciary and the government are not on different ends as perceived, and both are working together to ensure that the nation progresses. But again, cases like these clearly show there is some sort of a friction between both of these bodies. And how do you see this ongoing tension between the judiciary and the central government playing out, especially when it comes to appointments like these?
that is not a friction. That is a doctrine based on the check and balance. All the three organs, executive, parliament, and the judiciary. These are the three organs. They are working together for the nation.
Yes.
But sometimes check and balance is required. So you are calling it a conflict. That is not a conflict. This is the systems, and I agree that there must be some guidelines from the Supreme Court itself or government. Why not Supreme Court is recommending the name a particular time when the recommendation has come from the High Court? Supreme Court is also sitting over the recommendation made by the High Court Collegium, and they are not making the appointments. So there must be guidelines for not only Supreme Court but also for the central government to take the disposal, reject, maybe reject, or may accept the recommendations. And but again, collegium will recommend again, and then will go. And by that time, person who is likely to be elevated, he lost the interest, he surrendered, he said, "I am withdrawing my name," or he became the overage. 50, he crossed the 58 or 55. So now government will say, now it is overage case. So this such type of things are happening. So there must be some guidelines for that purpose, not only for both the parties, for the Supreme Court as well as for the government, for the recommendation. And regarding the pendency,
Absolutely,
I told you
Dr.
that
Chandra. You made a very interesting point there that there needs to be some sort of a guideline to ensure that everything works properly. This, of course, you're comparing it to the anatomy of a human body where every organ has to function for the body to function properly, and that's exactly how the executive and even the judiciary needs to be coming together to ensure that all of these small niggles are sorted out, and at the end of the day it's the nation that everyone is bothered about. Thanks a lot, Dr. Chandra, and also Mr. Menon, for joining us on this discussion.
And Ashish, to
It'll
make
be
a
very
last
interesting to
point
see
here,
what happens when the next date comes. Absolutely,
Ashish, to
Maman.
make a last point
Absolutely.
here, there is no friction between government and judiciary as such, because if you remember, the Prime Minister, Honorable Prime Minister Narendra Modi, has on the same occasion appreciated judiciary for coming up with the judgments in several languages, and it has created the outreach to all the parts of India. So there is no friction as such, but yes, the guidelines and rules are to be framed in the better interest of the nation, not either the judiciary or the parliament or politicians.
Well, absolutely. Mr. Memon, they're clearly saying that this is not a friction, but of course, we can probably term it as a niggle, if not a friction. And it'll be very interesting to see how the Supreme Court really approaches this when it comes to the next date. All right. Thanks a lot, Dr. Chandra and Mr. Memon, for joining us on this discussion, on this broadcast.